Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Tuesday Talks Out of the Shadows Black Families with Autism Speak Out. I am your host, Kim Riley, and I am really excited that we are having this conversation that it doesn't happen. The topic, of course, is very common, but the conversation doesn't happen until now. I also want to just share with you that I am the host and the founder of the Transition Academy Disability College and Career Planning Center. This topic and this moment marks a special moment in time for us. We are saying that we can no longer go along to get along. We can't ignore the obvious differences that race plays out within the disability community. It's time we have a long overdue discussion about the very different America that white people with autism live in versus the experiences of Black people with autism and other invisible disabilities. These last few weeks have been trying for all of us, as the entire world witnessed America continue to grapple with our legacy of racism in its most brutal form. The murder of George Floyd at the hands of a police officer while three other officers stood guard exposed how systems meant to protect the American people are intentionally flawed with fatal consequences. Okay, sorry. And I also wanted to point out that while other companies and organizations around the country have issued damning statements condemning racism, the autism community's largest advocacy organizations have really been disappointing with their very tepid responses. The Autism Society of America, which is our largest and oldest, definitely our oldest advocacy organization, been around since 1965. They did not issue a statement on racism. Their statement instead was on civil rights, as we can see. And they stood in solidarity with peaceful protesters. And then, and what's always telling is if you look in the comments section, most of the people who commented or hit like were supportive, but there was always that vocal faction. And on the one person who, for example, equated protesters and looters in the same vein. And then the Autism Speaks, definitely autism's largest and most well-funded organization, issued a little bit more stern statement, but definitely did not speak to police brutality and definitely did not speak directly to families, Black families with autism. And if you look at the comments, it was very much a slap in the face for those of us who are Black families. You have people watering down the issues, saying that police brutality happens to everyone of all race, and then they water it down even further, saying that everyone gets made fun of or harassed. And so just dealing with everything except the fact that we all witnessed this man get murdered at the hands of police. And then also, of course, you always have your Pollyanna population who wants to paint everything with rose-colored glasses and say, my child never sees color, and wouldn't the world be a better place if everyone lived in this Disney fantasy with us? So just very disappointing from our autism advocates. And as Black families, we are once again dealing with the very different world that we live in. On the one hand, we're members of the Black community, and this is home. This is where we were born. This is where we're raised. We know our history. And of course, there's a sense of strong belonging. The Black community, of course, is very sympathetic and very welcoming for the most part with disabilities. But there's nothing like being around somebody who knows exactly what you're going through. And so there, on the flip side, there's the autism community. And when I say that the autism community has embraced me and my son, the number of people who have reached out to us, my friends, and said, Kim, I don't know what you're going through, but please know that I support you. And also, just while my son Kendall was growing up, those in the autism community who embraced us, who I can have really candid conversations, and they will not judge. They know exactly what we're going through. And so when you are Black and impacted by autism, it's like we're having this dance where you got one foot in one world and one foot in another world. And I tell you, it's a challenge. So we've danced this dance for far too long. And today we're going to get comfortable being uncomfortable. We're going to go there and we're going to share what it's like to live as a Black person with a disability in these yet to be United States. Now, as I shared, we're living in two different worlds. And one of the things that we as Black people don't share with our white friends, no matter how close we are to them, is that we have the talk with our children. For many white families, the talk is about sex and sex education. For Black families, the talk is typically with your Black son when he gets a driver's license. And as we can see from this picture, you have mom and dad leaning in, looking very serious, talking to their son. And the talk usually says, son, now that you have your license, we need to talk about what to do when, not if, but when you get pulled over by the police. You keep your hands on the steering wheel. You say, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. When they ask you for your driver's license, do not just automatically reach for the license. You explain to the officer, officer, I am reaching in my back pocket for my driver's license. And when he nods or tells you to go forward, then you reach. And when it's the same, when it comes to reaching for your insurance, officer, I am reaching for my insurance, and move forward. We also warn them, do not be baited into an argument. And we tell them all of this with the hope that they will come home to us alive. As you can see by this picture with these parents and this young boy, we are no longer having the talk when our boys reach driving age. We are having to have the talk earlier and earlier. And traditionally, when we've had the talk with our boys, when they get their driver's license, we've ended the talk saying, it's not fair, but this is what I need you to do so that you can come home to me alive and we can fight this together. Well, today, we no longer have the assurance that if we give our sons the talk, that they will come to us alive. So this is a very strong reality that has been with Black families since forever. And because of the times that we're in, we are having to talk regardless of the age and the stage. And so I want to open things up by talking with a couple of dynamic moms about what it is like to raise Black sons with autism during these very torrential, racially charged times. Clarissa Collier of Virginia, are you prepared to share with us your experiences with your 7-year-old son?
I actually live in Missouri.
Oh, you do? Okay.
But no, my 7-year-old son was just diagnosed with autism. He also has Fragile X syndrome. And seeing all of this going on in the world is kind of hard. He's nonverbal. Compliance is not something that we do regularly. So what happens when my son is out and people don't recognize that something's different because he looks normal?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of hard because even in the Black community, a lot of times autism or any disability that doesn't make me really look disabled is like people don't acknowledge it. So it's kind of hard. Um, he he's only 7. I try to keep him not shielded, but under my wraps. We stay at home a lot. We can't really go out because everybody doesn't understand.
So, Clarissa, when you say you stay home a lot, this is regardless of COVID and quarantine, you stay home
Oh
a lot?
yeah. Oh yeah. Nothing to do with COVID at all. Some
Mm,
things we just can't do. We just don't do because it's not it I feel like he's not accepted.
okay.
So and a lot of times when we go out or if we go to autism functions or Fragile X meetings, nobody there looks like us.
Mm,
So nobody understands what it's like to actually I have a situation that happened. Our maintenance people that rent out our house were coming to fix our house. And my son was asleep, but he had woken up because the maintenance guy came in. My husband was downstairs. Nobody called me. Nobody called my husband. They automatically assumed that my son was at home by himself. And when
mm.
I came home from work, I had 2 cop cars and social services outside. And my husband was at home. Nobody asked, you just automatically assumed that he was here by himself, that we were doing something wrong. Nobody apologized. Nobody said anything.
Wow.
So the fact that my son was awake and couldn't say anything, couldn't say where his parents were, we felt like we were targeted.
Mm,
If we were a different color, or we lived in a different neighborhood, I don't think it would have happened that way.
so, just a taste, you fear maybe a taste of things to come.
Yes, most definitely. What if my son never speaks? How is he supposed to go out in the world and live when we're confined to our house because people don't understand?
Wow. So the sense of isolation
Yes,
and mhm,
most definitely.
okay,
And now we go out, I feel like everybody's staring at us.
okay. So definitely a need for community with Black families.
Definitely. Even when I find on social media and I see a Black family or a Black mom, like, hey, my son has autism too, I automatically reach out because I want to know what's different. What have you done to help your son along? How can I help him? I try to advocate for my son as much as possible, just because I don't want him to ever feel ashamed about who he is. And autism is a part of our life.
So true. Thank you, Clarissa.
You're welcome.
Our next mom is Deborah Vines of Chicago. Deborah is the founder and executive director of The Answer. And I first became familiar with Deborah when I watched a PBS special about autism and transition, and the fact that we're at the point where we have the largest number of adults with autism in the country. And they were looking across the nation at how different people were kind of filling gaps, and they spotlighted Deborah's work. So Deborah, welcome, and please share with us about your son, what it's been like raising a Black son with autism, and how you are navigating these times in your work.
Well, good evening, everyone. How's everybody doing today? How much time do we have? Because
right,
it's definitely been a journey. My son is 32 years old, although I don't claim to be a day over 35. He's Clarissa, I can definitely concur with a lot of emotions that you're going through right now with your son being 7. That's actually some of the things that you're feeling is the reason why I actually started doing what I'm doing 13 years ago, because my husband and I, my late husband actually passed away 2 years ago. We just grew tired of being the only voice in the community and trying to find resources in our community, not just supportive services for us, but for our son as well. We felt very isolated because we had to go to communities of people that didn't look like us. To be able to just go to a support group meeting. And again, being in a support group meeting, we felt like, I can imagine what leopards felt like back in the day, because I felt totally alone and isolated. But to date, we've serviced over 4,000 families, and being a mom of an adult son with limited executive functioning and limited language is very scary right now. I have a 46-year-old as well. And when I was much younger, I used to tell him, because I used to faint a lot when I was younger. He was about maybe 6 or 7 years old. And I would tell him, make sure you grab my purse. You hold my purse if I ever get sick. And I can't tell Jason to hold my purse. I can't tell him if I faint or if I get sick and we're out, don't talk to the police. Don't put your hands in your pocket. Don't make any rash moves. But when we started The Answer Incorporated, the first thing that I wanted to do was to do a police training on the signs and symptoms of someone with autism, and not just someone with autism, but someone urban in the African American community, because at the end of the day, things are different in every household. And those of you who like you say, Kim, that try to patty cake around the issue, and it's definitely patty caking around the issue, because when a white person has a cold in the disability world, we have pneumonia.
yes.
And that's just the way it is. Like I said, my son is 32, and I'm not just speaking from emotions, I'm speaking from facts. Being in the times that we are in right now is very, very challenging. My son does a lot of echolalia. So what I've done, and this is to speak especially to Clarissa, being in the community, when people look at and stare still, that's a teaching moment for you. It's a teaching moment for you to explain what your son is doing, why he's doing it. Because if we don't educate people in our community as to what our children are doing and why they're doing it, to let the next door neighbor know that my child has autism, to talk to the person at the grocery store that you go to quite often, make sure that you have you can't not isolate your child from the world, first of all. I know it's hard, but you can't isolate it, because God forbid, you're not going to live forever. And our job as parents is to even if you have a child with autism that's highly functioning, low functioning, our job as parents is to make our children the best that they can be, and not just being in the house, it's being in the world. And being in the world is educating the world to our children. Because at the rate the numbers are growing astronomically. When my son was diagnosed, the numbers were 1 in 1,000. Now they're 1 in what, 45? Something like that.
Something
So
like that.
at the end of the day, it's our job as African Americans to make sure that the community is well aware of everything that goes on in our household. It's time out for the secrets. It's time out for being shamed. It's time out for placing blame about why your child is autistic. It's time out for blaming it on the teachers. And if the school system is not working, it's time out for us to stop just sitting around and complaining about it. It's time for us to collectively come together. And that's why I'm happy to see all the protests as it relates to George Floyd. But as it relates to the autism community, it's time for us to collectively come together. And thank you so much, Ms. Kim, for reaching out to me, because our agency services the Chicagoland area, but I'm always willing to partner with other parents, because just like you say, Clarissa, sometimes I know that you probably feel like you're in this alone. Because sometimes, even now, with all the families that I've serviced, I do still feel alone. So with that being said, how am I living with autism? To start out, I accepted it. I accepted it, and I take Jason with me everywhere I go. Everywhere. I mean, from Springfield to, we've passed a couple of laws. Everybody on the Senate floor knows Jason. Does he stand up sometimes and act out? Yes, he does. Sometimes they look at him? Yes, they do. Do sometimes they ask questions, and then I'm ready to answer them. I take them to the grocery store. I take them, when I go work out, I take them to the gym. And yes, it's a challenge, but you know what? God blessed us with these wonderful, wonderful human beings. He blessed us. And it's very challenging being an autism parent, and it's more challenging being an advocate and a parent. But all of you that are on this call, I'm sure that you want to get educated, probably as parents. I don't know what the demographics of people that are on the call, but to get educated as a parent. But I encourage each and every one of you to advocate for autism in the Black community today, because we're not just Black, we autistic.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you so much, moms. It's us mighty moms who hold down the fort, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. We're going to now switch gears a bit, and I want to hear from, let's see. I'm sorry, I'm trying to make sure I'm going in order here. Can we also hear from Eric Evans? I met Eric. I reached out to him on one of the tone deaf pages. I don't remember if it was Autism Society of America or Autism Speaks, but he spoke out in the comment section about his work educating police on how to interact with people with autism. And Eric, I would love for you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, about your work, and about how you are dealing with life now as a Black man with autism in today's racially charged times.
All right, how you guys doing? Can you hear me well?
We can, but we can't see your face. We can
Oh,
only
sorry.
see you. There you go.
I was reading something. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're
So,
fine.
Essentially, my name is Eric Evans. I'm from suburban Philadelphia area. That's where I live now. I grew up in the inner city. Pretty much what I do is I develop communication-based presentations for local law enforcement who may or will interact with civilians diagnosed with mental disabilities and intellectual barriers. What I do, though, is primarily focused on people on the spectrum. So that's just a little introduction about myself. In regards to what I'm currently working on now, I'll just start reading and listing off a few things. So I essentially train officers to not just interact with people on the spectrum and to de-escalate situations, but I also do it from the standpoint of identifying people on the spectrum. The reason why I had to make that clear difference is because we as Black people are at the highest rate of not just being undiagnosed in the spectrum, but undiagnosed with mental disabilities across the board. A lot of us don't. Unfortunately, a lot of us in our community don't really see the need or the fix or the urgency in confirming that some of our kids are diagnosed with certain things because we have so many other things on our plate. It's hard to juggle. You know what I mean? With what's more important or not. So essentially, I'm just trying to train officers to be not only less violent but also lifesavers as well. The reason why I got into it was obviously because I'm sorry, I don't know if I mentioned this already. I have Asperger's, so I'm on the autistic spectrum. I'm high functioning though, so I pretty much use my voice as like I guess a voice for the voiceless. I wasn't always super verbal. When I was younger, I was pretty docile. I didn't like talking to people, didn't like interacting. But through years of therapy, I kind of gathered myself and kind of mastered the art of communicating, I guess for that sense. Just in regards to what I do a little bit, essentially, I teach officers about analyzing and identifying spectrum range, acknowledgement of the communication barriers, properly interpreting body language and facial expressions, using emotional support systems and objects to prevent, sensory overload, understanding impulsive reaction versus, articulate response, interactive simulation, and I also do interactive simulation and sensory workshops. So pretty much what I do is I try to put police officers in the shoes of people on the spectrum when, in regards to like showing them how uncomfortable people on the spectrum could be in certain situations. So pretty much my three objectives are the opportunity to train public service professionals. I had been given that. So a little story. So when I was in community college in Philadelphia, I was like afraid, honestly, for the most part. My mom didn't tell me about my diagnosis until I was probably in my early teens, only because she felt as though, and I did have a lot on my plate already. I don't think she wanted me to have like, I guess, uh, a second thought to make me even more different than I already was. But once I found out about my condition as a early teen, I was mature enough to understand what it was and what I could do to help myself or whatever. So essentially, uh, the proposal that I have that's actually getting a lot of attention from government officials is an ID badge or a logo badge. What I want to do is I want to make it possible for our children or our kids with autism to have a logo or discrete badge on their state ID that tells the officer like where they lie on the spectrum or what type of disability it has in order to prevent escalated situations and routine traffic stops or any type of idea any type of environment where police officers actual identification to know who they're speaking to. They will know immediately that this person is on a spectrum where they range and are trained on how to deal with those things. So I remember I was asked uh, sorry, I'm going all over the place. So I say that to say when I was scared from like seeing all the things in the news, or whatever, it kind of broke me. It made me really frightened. I felt hopeless. I'll just read off something I wrote down because someone recently asked me like, why did I get into this? So the proposal details and specifics were not meant with the intention of being financially profitable or monopolized. The original, current, and forever intention of this proposal is survival, unfortunately. One of the most dominant traits of mine as a result of being on the spectrum is my excessive borderline obsession with preparation. I'm sure a lot of the mothers are familiar with their kids and maybe want to be prepared or not, or being knocked off their set schedule or anything like that. From preparing to put on my shoes to preparing an exit strategy once I enter a crowded venue of people. Some parents have the conversations with their children about public perception of them being Black, Latino, Asian, Islamic, Jewish, an amputee, having a skin condition, being a woman, masculine, feminine, obese, thin, etc., and how they're going to need to prepare to counteract discrimination and unprovoked ridicule based on their natural appearance. Some of these bring more trouble than others, unfortunately, as we know. The thing that these all have in common, though, are that these are visible differences. But what about when your differences are seemingly invisible? People have physical differences, which brings shallow division amongst the misguided and miseducated. But those people with said differences can also spot others with the same or similar differences, kind of like what you ladies explained before. Like as Black people, we can kind of identify with other Black people, what Black people are going through. And we can do that because we can obviously see who's Black or not. They can build a sense of community, accountability, and support. Something that is very hard to do when your difference is invisible to most. But when it's invisible, it brings another conversation for parents. Now imagine having to have both of these conversations with the same child or person, an individual with both physical differences that would make navigation through life tricky, along with an invisible one that would cause expression difficulties. The perfect storm of terror when it comes to being misunderstood as being Black and autistic. True or false, I carry that burden for years. And as a young and late teen, watching the news and witnessing disturbing videos of men that look like me being murdered or killed for simply looking like me. I combine that with, I combine that with always feeling misunderstood, with self-aware and high functioning enough to know that it's because of my Asperger's diagnosis, but then also be mentally tortured by the idea that it will forever be a part of me and I can never turn it off. It comes with gifts, but also severe limitations in society that was not designed to even consider someone with a mind like mine would exist. This made my anxiety go through the roof. I was desperate and scared for answers. I was so afraid of what seemed to be 10,000 scenarios of going wrong situations in my head that ended with me being dead at the hands of law enforcement or quote unquote concerned neighbors. That I built up the courage to request a police academy to allow me to sit in their teaching about communication. I figured I only felt hopeless because I didn't know what they were looking for from a communication standpoint. And that was that. So, and this is where my spirit kind of got crushed. When I reached out to this local like police cadet training thing at a community college in suburban Philadelphia, I told them, I was on the spectrum and, seeing things in the news, I really just want to get in and see how you guys communicate so I can know like what I should say or do in the event of getting pulled over. And this man actually told me that it wasn't up to him and that I needed to go talk to a government official, a local government official. I went and talked to that local government official's secretary, and she told me that there was no such thing, that it's not the case, and that it's up to his discretion. I then went back to that man, and he just flat out rejected me and told me no, he won't do it. That crushed me at that point because I felt like, uh, like me dying at this point was never written in stone. I felt that like my demise was imminent with every day I walked out of my home because I was in this position to where I'm on a spectrum and I probably can't communicate effectively in heated exchanges specifically. And on top of that, I'm Black. Every encounter with police felt like a close call with death. At some point, I became so afraid in college that I wrote a brief presentation outline and pitched it as a training module of some sort to the director of law enforcement of education. She agreed, and I saw a new window of opportunity beckon, an opportunity to teach and enlighten people on the plight of those on the spectrum, an opportunity to give parents of autistic children and adults peace of mind that said there were some officers trained on duty who understood their son or daughter, an opportunity that a high functioning adults such as myself can relieve some anxiety knowing that they may not have to be super carefully or perfectly articulate their condition to police officer during a traffic stop. That opportunity was 4 years and 6 presentations ago, and that opportunity is kind of this proposal. But because of that man at the school I transferred to, Mansfield University, his name is Scott Henry, who's the director of the municipality. When I pitched him this idea, I didn't know how it would go based on the last interaction, and he really encouraged me to say I had an opportunity to do this. He recognized the opportunity as someone being on the spectrum, and he also understood the opportunity of me being a man of color to do this. And I wanted to get to a few things. I'm sorry if I'm just rambling.
No, this is good. You said 4 years, and how many presentations ago was that?
6.
6. Okay.
Yep. So I also wanted to talk about the double-edged sword.
Okay.
Coming across racism while being on the spectrum versus the Black community not really accepting or understanding what our condition is. I feel as though within our community, the only people that understand and accept it are unfortunately people directly affected by it. I kind of thought about that when Clarissa was talking about people in the public staring at her and not really understanding. And I'm glad Deborah spoke out about that. Well, yeah, one of the things that's kind of hard for me to navigate through as I'm doing this is kind of gathering the attention of Black people, because I feel as though a lot of us feel as though they think it won't happen to them until it happens to them, and they're unprepared and unequipped to deal with those things. Um, also, I wanted to thank Clarissa for speaking out. I really enjoyed her talking about the uh, the situation in regards to DHS coming up to her house and police officers. Because the first thing I thought of was one of the training modules we do with our officers. We train them that, like, sensory things such as bright lights, loud noises, commands, demands. They don't sit well with people in the spectrum. They don't react to it. So we have this thing set up where we'll run officers through something where they have to like recite a script, and while they're reciting the script that they had to memorize, there'll be flashing lights from their face, or it'll be three people talking at one time. Anything to simulate someone on the spectrum trying to understand what a stranger is doing. That's pretty much what we try to do. And that's pretty much it. Does anyone have any like direct or indirect questions I can ask or answer maybe?
Oh, Eric, we're going to switch gears real quick. And
Oh, sure, sorry.
That's okay. We're going to ask questions at the end.
Gotcha.
Okay, but no, this was really good. Thank you so much.
No problem.
And our next speaker is Miss Ty Jones. Ty, can you share with us the work that you are doing? Ty is in Baltimore, and she has been a special educator for, I'm just going to say a few years, because she looks 25. And I think she, myself, and Deborah, we're all we're eternally 25. So, so Ty works with an organization called MindWorks Collaborative. MindWorks Collaborative is based in Washington, D.C., also does work in Baltimore, Maryland. And their whole purpose is to bring together people of color, professionals who are working in special education, therapies from speech and physical and occupational therapies, and providing professional development to those professionals of color. Well, what happened was they were doing their work, and because of COVID, the charter schools reached out and said, hey, our families definitely feel very alienated. Can you do some work to build a support group for people, for families of color? And they stepped up, and wow, we found ourselves after the George Floyd protests, dealing with a pandemic within the pandemic. So Ty, can you tell us about the work you all are doing?
I sure will. Thank you so much, Kimberly, for inviting us on here.
You know what? We can hear you very faintly.
Okay, let's get this. Is this any better?
A little bit. Let's see.
Is this any better? Okay, let me yell. Okay, how about I yell? Is that better?
That's good. I was going to say, you are not shy, so.
I'm not shy, and I was a classroom teacher for about 15 years. So I have a classroom voice if need be. Thank you so much for this. Just hearing these stories is saddening to me because I've been out of the classroom and working in the university level for so long, as well as nonprofit, and I feel like we haven't moved the needle. When I left Kansas in 2003, that was a project that I started working on as far as working with police officers, and I couldn't get traction. And that was just with some of my immediate experiences. When I was at Kansas, I had a roommate that had Asperger's syndrome. And I remember having she had a huge tantrum where the next door neighbor called the cops. And it was a white woman. And he was like, oh, autism. Okay, no worries. And I'm like, hey, you have to know what's happening here. So we ended up having a conversation. But outside of that, I couldn't get any real leverage even after that situation. There's some other situations that happened with her. And so I wondered automatically how different it would have looked if this was a Black woman or a Black man having the same level of energy, or the cops needed to call for the level of noise or disruption that was happening within our home. So fast forward to now, with My Words Collaborative, we specify in working with special education leaders of color, and with building that community around the special ed leaders of color, we believe that by working and focusing on equity and focusing on race and disability collectively, then we're being very intentional about how different those issues may arise within our communities and within our schools. As Eric mentioned, so many of our kids are not being diagnosed and go undiagnosed for a lot longer than their white and other race peers. And so we need to be really clear about and intentional about how we're going to deal with race and disability when it comes to our population. And so as a response with the COVID, we had already started kind of working on some online support. And Kim mentioned our connection with one of our charter schools that we work with, but we pushed out one of our online programs, which is the Mind Hive. And the Mind Hive is another space, a resource space that we're creating that will later, right now is holding just several resources. There's some conversations being held between practitioners and parents. And we're moving that towards being a place to also hold courses later on with micro-credentialing and that kind of thing. So some of the support that we've been able to offer our charter school network, as well as some other folks who just kind of jumped in, or just resources, resources, what to do, how to teach, how to set up a schedule for your student, how to set up, physical spaces, putting together rules, putting together a daily schedule, like some of the things that as a classroom educator, they roll off my tongue so quickly. But as a parent who is still, a lot of our parents are also working at home with their children, as with all their children. So figuring out how to even coordinate this distance learning situation, as well as work and home, how does this all work out? And so we've been really working with this group of parents around how to set things up initially, what are some of the expectations, and also supporting teachers and leaders on what are the expectations. How do you make these accommodations in a virtual or distance learning space? How are we making sure that people's IEPs are being followed? There are some school districts in this country that they decided for the first few weeks they weren't going to give anybody any work because they didn't know how they were going to make the accommodations and modifications for student special ed. So no one got any learning because they didn't know how to do the accommodations and modifications. So that's crazy all by itself. So it's like, what do we do to make sure that kids are getting what they need, that parents are being supported, and that people are getting their support that they need to work and learn. And so being able to provide some support to our parents as well as teachers and administrators in this process has been really, we were able to jump in there. We were grateful we were able to do it. So this really pushed us into a more of an online model that we see ourselves moving into over the next year or two as our number one way of interacting with our community. We recognize the need to really center Black people and Black people who are working with Black children with disabilities, because what it looks like for us may look very different. A story that I tell regularly, I taught kindergarten. That's what I had my babies. I had kindergarten kids with autism for about 2 or 3 years before I went and got my master's in autism. And one of the things that I noticed when I got back to school, they kept saying how, kids with autism, they're not social, they're not this, they're not. I'm like, yeah, my kids were. And so the expectations for a lot of our kids and how we socialize our children, it looks different. Being Black, being brown in a family of 20 is going to give you a different looking child when they get into the classroom. And this is the same when you have a child with a disability as well. And so recognizing that we may look different and there's expectations that are different within our community, within our culture. And so that may have some impact, or it does have an impact on how our students show up in our classrooms, making sure that kids are getting the proper diagnosis, getting the proper support. I've had parents not accept support because they didn't want white clinicians in their homes. And so talking about all of those things and being able to be honest about what do you do with, who are the resources in your community, who can you reach out to nationally, are things that, we're in the process of making sure that all of those things are available through our various ways of interacting with our folks through the Mind Hive, as well as just with the work that we do with Mind Works Collaborative overall.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jones. I want to switch gears a little bit. Again, I want to thank a lot of my white friends who have been my sources of inspiration, who I've leaned on through the years. Once again, they came through to check on me emotionally right now. And I want to say from the bottom of my heart, I'm thankful to you. Another common question that we're getting, just because disability and race, there's such a tone deafness in the autism and disability community, is what can I as a white person do? How can I be an ally? And I was fortunate to reach out to an awesome young man. His name is Steve Aspel. And I'm not sure where Steve lives because I met Steve on Twitter. And I can barely tweet. And so he had just really powerful statements. And so Steve said, as we were talking, I said, Steve, can you join us? And he said, well, I really have a problem presenting. I get anxiety really bad. And I said, okay, well, let's work on this, because we in the disability community, we talk accommodations all the time. Steve, let's talk accommodations because we need your voice. And so we came up with where he would record his statement on how white people can be allies to Black people. And I want to share this statement with you all. Let's see, give me just a moment. I had it queued up earlier. And let's see, let's see. Okay, I'm sorry, just one moment here. Okay, I'm gonna have to go in my email really quick from earlier. And shucks. Oh, here it is.
Will have a relationship with racism with benefits.
Do you all hear
No
it?
amount of performative allyship will ever exempt you from racism, because
Yep, I can
it's
hear
a
it.
wokeness award and it's not a one-way street. And let me be clear, this is not about you. Yes, I'm talking to you, social media influencers who put up a motivational message and a hashtag to show your support. I'm definitely talking to you, congressional Democrats who take a knee and wear kente cloth for the cameras in honor of George Floyd. This is not how to be an ally. Being an ally is about realizing the many moments in your life which, despite being disabled, gay, poor, whatever, whiteness has given you an advantage. The fact that your workplace overlooks resumes with black-sounding names, that seeing a black man walking around your neighborhood is unusual enough that it gives you pause, that black authors get paid less than their white counterparts, and that young black illustrators get turned down because their work isn't mainstream enough. These are only a few examples of white privilege. Here's a better one. For context, I am a white autistic male. Because I struggle with empathy, I cannot easily put myself in another one's shoes, so to speak. I have no idea what it's like to be anyone but myself, but I do have compassion and a sense of justice, so I work with what I know. I know what it feels like to be on the margins, to be seen with suspicion, to lose a loved one, to have panic attacks and autistic meltdowns. I know what it's like to be afraid, to be both a parent and someone's child. When I put the pieces of my experience together, they'll always just be that, pieces. But because I have compassion, I listen to what people say about their experience. And when they tell me how they'd like to be treated, I take notes and I try my hardest. If you are white and autistic like me, you will undoubtedly attract the attention of police for the way you naturally behave. Our stimming, anxiety, and lack of eye contact are perceived as dishonesty. Our sensory sensitivities, difficulty understanding and responding to instructions under pressure, our unpredictable movements, the way we seek out unusual things that relate to our special interests, how we put our hands in our pockets so nobody can see us stimming. Everything about an autistic looks suspicious to the uninitiated, especially in a stressful situation. One time, I was stopped at a traffic checkpoint and had a flashlight shown in my eyes. While I was shaking and stuttering, the officer asked if I was on any drugs and asked me to get out of the vehicle to walk in a straight line. It was terrifying. Luckily, another officer saw me and asked if I took any medication that would make my eyes dilate. So while avoiding eye contact with my hands in my pockets, I explained that I took Adderall. They all had a good laugh and I got away safely. Another time, I was looking for native plants in a hiking trail, wearing military surplus bags of camera lenses. Native plants were my special interest and I was photographing them. So when I emerged in a clearing, I was immediately surrounded by police. Apparently an NFL team was training there and they thought I looked suspicious, so they searched my bags, and as soon as I was allowed, I ran away without looking back. I got to go home that night. For white autistics, getting stopped by police is inevitable. It's almost a rite of passage. We can talk about the many times we were sent home, traumatized, but nonetheless lived to tell the tale. Now imagine how this might pay out for a black autistic, face to face with a white police officer with PTSD and his own racial bias. You can have all the money in the world, but when you're confronted by police, privilege has nothing to do with anything other than the fact that your skin color could mean the difference between politeness and brutality, a ticket or an arrest, life or death. So if you want to be an ally, you need to take this knowledge and let it really sink in. I want you to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that white privilege is not a politically correct buzzword, it is real. You need to get angry that autistics like you, mothers of autistic children like you, churchgoers like you, human beings like you are scared. This is real life for them, and they're tired of the false promises and betrayal by so-called allies. So being an ally is not about checking on your black friends to see if they're okay. It is about boosting their voices and speaking up on their behalf when necessary. It's about offering your friends support, but giving them space and time to process. Being an ally means never speaking over black people, Being an ally means that you never speak over black people or pretend that you know what it feels like to be in their shoes. I wouldn't want a non-autistic person telling me what it's like to be autistic, and you wouldn't want a stranger to write your autobiography. So don't co-opt blackness as your own experience. Being an ally is about listening to and lifting up black voices, learning from those individual experiences as you go. It's about combining that knowledge with your own resources and privilege and using it to educate other white people. Yes, even your relatives when they air their problematic views. This is scary, but you can do this. Being an ally is about using your privilege to help black folks succeed. It means recommending your black colleagues for promotions and pointing out their good work that goes unnoticed. Black-white inequality is worse today than it was in the year 2000. Do everything in your power to correct that. Being an ally also isn't about perfection. It's a moving target and depends upon the individual Black people in your lives that you hope to support, such as the people in your industry or community. There's no universally agreed upon right way to be an ally to Black people, which brings me to my next point. Black lives do matter, every single one, and not just the nice ones who meet your standards. Intersectionality is a tangled web of identities, disabilities, and privileges, and you won't understand or agree with everyone. But if you do say Black Lives Matter, you need to be inclusive of all Black people. The mass of peaceful protesters and the small handful of looters. Every single one of those Black lives will matter tomorrow. Those Black lives will matter when the dust is settled too. Will you be an ally then?
So, that powerful statement from Steve, he just absolutely blew me away. And he said that if he could just help one white person to know that it's okay and that it's really this simple, and it's not about perfection. It's about when Black people are not in the room, standing up, speaking up, being an ally, that's what it's all about. And so we thank him for his message. I know we are right at our time. I was wondering if anyone maybe had a question. If so, we could open it up and really briefly and have one final question, or even a thought if you have a statement. Okay, Liz.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Liz.
Thank you so much for organizing this. I participated in the earlier one as well too, and I appreciate everybody's perspectives. Thank you, Eric, for your personal perspective as well. I guess my biggest question is, you know, police officers are oftentimes acting from a place of fear and automatic assumptions that doesn't even allow for the opportunity for someone to produce an ID or to show a bracelet or to consider looking at a license plate before they shoot someone dead. I'm thinking about the gentleman that was shot dead in his car as he was reaching for his ID, right? And his pregnant girlfriend was there, right? As one horrible of many horrible situations. And so that I'm just, you know, there's a very visceral, deep racial bias that is prevalent in individuals and in the system of law enforcement. And so I'm asking myself and just this community, like, what can we do to try to make a change in that, to try to start to move the needle on that? Because somebody's not going to have a chance. My son is not going to, he doesn't have autism, but he has attention deficit. He won't have the chance to like grab something. He's 20. You know, my niece will be processing. It'll take her time to respond, and they'll think she's being non-compliant, and then they'll just overreact because of what they're seeing. I mean, you know.
Can I speak to that, please?
Go ahead, Deborah.
Liz, I definitely concur with everything that you're saying. One good thing that we have is that we have a voice. George, like I said earlier, George Floyd's murder has is ignited a spark in so many areas, and I'm so happy that you have created this forum tonight, Kim. It's our voice that's gonna go to our local police departments and say, listen, this is how I feel. I'm afraid, because at the end of the day, they do want to go home to their families. I have a lot of friends that are in law enforcement, and yes, the things that happen in law enforcement right now truly suck, but it's the policies. And until the policies change, they real cocky about doing stuff and getting away with it. But at the end of the day, our voices is what matters. like I said, going to the police department, making sure that they're properly trained. You can ask these questions. Have your officers been trained on how to deal with a person with autism or attention deficit disorder, or just someone that's not listening like they should? I mean, it's probably because I've been in this community for so long, but I can walk into a grocery store and spot someone with autism a mile away. I can spot someone with a brain injury a mile away, or whether they had a stroke. You know, these are things that the officers should be trained in. And that's why myself and my agency consistently goes to, especially the police departments that are in my area, because my agency is small, but we cover a lot of things. But at the same time, even if you don't have an agency, if you're not an advocate, you're a parent, so that makes you an advocate. And go to the police department and ask these questions. You have the right. You have the right to ask them, when was the last time your officers were trained on autism, on the signs and symptoms of autism? Have you had an encounter with any police officers? Create make sure that you have an emblem that's in your car that my child has attention deficit disorder. So as soon as they walk up, I have something pasted right on the side of my window on both sides. My son has autism, so they can't say they did not know. I have a camera that's on my rear view. I got it about maybe 6 months ago. And as soon as the police pull me over, I cut that camera on. So that, God forbid, if something happens to me, a story can be told. You know, we have to be extra proactive in what we do, Liz. And I know it's tiring. We're supposed to be living in the land of the free and the home of the brave. This is what it should be, but it's just not. And we got to put that extra work in. It's up to us now to police ourselves.
And Liz, I wanted to jump in. I have reached out to several officers in Kansas City, and we have CIT, crisis intervention trained officers. And so if someone does call the police, it is so essential that they say this person has a disability or seems to have a disability, and they send out the CIT trained officers who are absolutely awesome at de-escalating situations. They've been very humane with us. Another thing to remember is autism touches all of us, and officers and their families are impacted by autism in a big way. And so we actually have an opportunity to reach out to officers impacted by autism and to start a dialogue and interjecting the special nuances of color and race and ethnicity within that discussion. So I think that we have a captive audience, a sympathetic audience. One of the officers that I talked to, he said, you know, those of us who've been impacted, we worry that as careful as we try to be, that one day we are going to get it wrong. We fear that because, again, it's in the moment. And so it is up to us to, first of all, we as Black families, we have to mobilize. I cannot tell you the number of people we reach out to and they don't follow through. So those of us who are here, let's not just come together, let's stay together. And then let's strategize on how to work a national movement. One of the reasons why I'm based in Kansas City, but one of the reasons I'm reaching out to Chicago, I reached out to North Carolina, Virginia, Philly, DC, was because I couldn't get enough people in Kansas City to really follow through. Everybody is so scared. And so I said, well, I know it's enough of us nationwide. So I'm stalking these pages and reaching out saying, hey, are you interested? We have got to come together with a collective voice, and we've got to mobilize and amplify our voices and advocate for our sons and our daughters.
Kim, can I say
do it.
something? Oh, I'm sorry.
Let's do it. Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Deborah Ferguson, and Kim and I have been in some of the same classes with our sons. And my son's name is Joe Walker. And Joe is 26, and he was diagnosed as being severely autistic and educably mentally handicapped. Joe is driving a car now, and I've had to pray. And I was going to say, I talked to some of the officers as well that were trained to spot people who have disabilities. And one of the officers said to my son, ask for an officer who has a circle badge. Well, Joe got a ticket about 6 months after he got his car. And he was on his way to Penn Valley and to college. And he said, he forgot until the officer wrote the ticket. He says, do you have a circle badge? And the officer felt so bad about giving him a ticket that when we went to court to pay it, the officer had paid the ticket. And there is a heart out there.
Yes.
You know, fear cancels our faith. We've got to stop being afraid and step out and get out there. And that's why I think this is so beautiful. Look at everybody. Mm-hmm. I was brought to tears by Steve's speech. It just was, and Deborah and Clarissa, I thank you, because it is difficult to rally people. You know, a prophet is accepted saving his own country. Amen. So don't give up the fight. Don't give up the fight. I'm here, and we're gonna all get together, and it's so nice to meet you guys.
Thank you.
May I respond to Deborah?
Okay. Sure. And you know what? I'm gonna go to the other room and plug my laptop up. So just keep the conversation going.
So Deborah, when you mentioned your son and them diagnosing him as severely autistic, my mother actually had a lot of hardships with the public school system in Philadelphia. When I was in first and second grade, I was dubbed to be unteachable because the teaching methods that they used they didn't sit well with me. I didn't adapt. I had to essentially teach myself, and with my mom's help, of course, how to write, how to do basic mathematics. Every summer from first grade till maybe 8th grade was filled with doing homework assignments. I couldn't go outside and play. I couldn't do anything like that. But I just wanted to say this, that hard work and perseverance definitely shatters any barricade that any doctor or psych can tell you about the limitations of your son on the spectrum. So I just wanted to give you high spirits to make sure that you knew that, and you knew that, and any other mom know that whatever doc or psych tells you, like, you know, they probably won't be able to do this or won't be able to do that. I've personally seen kids on the spectrum that were from nonverbal to very limited verbal to having full-out conversations like I am today. That was all.
Well, you know what? Thank you for that, Eric, and I appreciate those wonderful, inspiring words. When Jason was diagnosed, they did say that he would not walk. They said he would not talk. He would practically be a vegetable. But thank goodness. How old are you, Eric?
I'm 27.
Okay, Eric, you're 27 and Jason is 32. Jason's executive functioning is a little bit different than yours. Trust me. Right now, although his academic level is very limited, and sometimes right now, he just actually learned how to write because his cognitive skills were just very, very unlimited. But I'm a mom like yours as well. But when I saw that his academic functionings were very limited, what I did is I concentrated on his social skills. And so he can make a bed better than probably anybody on this Zoom. He washes dishes, he makes his bed. He when we do laundry, I have especially since pandemic and he can't go to his day program, I did a makeshift laundry room. So I mess up the towels every day. He has to stack cans and the labels have to show. He folds up socks. You know, you have to make the socks. And so I do those type of things, and we focus on crossing the street and things like that. So when he does have to go live in a Scylla home or someplace like that, he might not have a high executive function as it relates to writing his name or counting change from $1 and things like that. But he can take care of himself as it relates to dressing himself, feeding himself, things like that. But I do take my hat off to you, Eric, for even being that catalyst of what you're doing. I take my hat off to you. I would actually like for you to be one of my speakers next Friday. I'm doing a panel discussion with I hate to use high executive functioning individuals about being approached by the police. So my number is in the chat. So could you give me a call? Either I give you a call tomorrow. I would love for you to be one of my panelists. But thank you for those encouraging words. But I tell you, I'm that mom like your mom. I'm that girl.
Eric, I
wanted to chime in.
Oh, I'm sorry, Lynn.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm in Massachusetts, and I also have a child on the spectrum, and I run an autism foundation because of Alexis. What I have done also, just like everybody said, is gone to the police department and spoken to them about my child, told them about what to look for. We're a minority, there's not a lot of us in the community, so it was essential that they could identify her if they saw her. Also, she elopes. So if for any reason she got out of the house, I needed to let neighbors know that she is my child and this is her address. She's nonverbal, but this is where you can send her to. So I think as parents, we all need to go to our, talk to our neighbors, go to the police station, go to the local grocery stores and tell people about our children and how to identify them and how to help them. And that goes a long way to keep them safe. And Clarissa, you can always reach out. Yep, go ahead.
That situation that I told you guys about earlier, the police officer recommended that I go to the police department and have my son fingerprinted because he does not talk. He's nonverbal. So they're like, well, we need a way to identify him. And that was the only way that they could come up with.
Hey, I'm sorry, interrupt real quick. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear us okay?
Sure.
Leonard Thomas, Rebecca Thomas, our son Miles, 4 years old, severe autism. But I wanted to talk about a project that's happening. It's called Project Lifesaver. And pretty much what happens is through our local government. The sheriff comes out every month. Miles has a RF bracelet on his ankle, and the sheriff comes out, changes the battery every month. But essentially for that example, if he were to step out, he were to leave the house without us knowing or anything like that, we could call the sheriff's department, let them know that Miles is missing. They will activate that RF frequency, and they will be able to track that frequency. And not only that, they're trained on not utilizing the lights, the helicopters, all the sounds that usually would be aversive to children who have autism or people who have autism. So I would venture to say to maybe look into your community, look into your local police department or your local government agency and see if that is available to you in your community. It's definitely a peace of mind. Or just kind of having that option, God forbid you need it, but it's available to you. So once again, project, yes ma'am.
Oh, yeah. No, I just wanted to say that I have to get off the call now. I'm sorry, but Kim, is there any way that you can just share my information with the group, or either, I don't know if you have a group that everybody's information is in, because I would love to be able to connect with you guys. We do a newsletter, and we just have a lot of things that, although we are global and from different parts of the state, I'm a mom and I'm an advocate, and thank God for electronics. And I would just love to partner with any agency in another state. One day we'll be able to actually come together, maybe for a big global party or something. But great job, parents. Great job, Kim. Thank you so much for inviting me, but I got to get ready to get on another call.
Okay, and we'll be talking tomorrow, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
God bless you guys.
Bye-bye.
Rebecca and Leonard and Rebecca, where are you from?
We're out of Maryland, Southern Maryland.
Southern Maryland. Okay. Awesome. Did someone else have a comment or a question? Oh, Rebecca.
Hi.
Okay.
I'm Rebecca. When you said Rebecca a second ago, I'm like, I'm Rebecca too.
I know, right?
I'm Rebecca. I have a son named Riley. I'm also from Massachusetts. I have 3 children. My oldest son, Riley, is 16, and he does have severe autism. We've been through the spectrum of psychiatric placements, adversarial school district, legal battles, having the school district called DCF on us, lots of different things. one of the goals that I have when I was in my previous town, I ended up moving to a different town that I thought would support my son better, and it's been a much better situation. But I created an event called Community Unity, and I brought first responders together with families. And it's one of the things I believe, like many of you were saying, as advocates, it's our responsibility. It's this gift we've been given, but we take our experiences and we can use them to help other people in our community. So that's what I'm going to continue to try to do, is connect families. And I understand Clarissa was talking about feeling like people don't get it. She's alone and isolated. We've been through that. And there was time where we really couldn't leave the house because Riley's behaviors were so significant that he would have episodes. We couldn't get in the car. Now he's 16. He's really worked through a lot of those things, but I can relate to that aspect of it as an autism parent. One of the things that some of the other people were talking about, ways to, other than fingerprinting, I know in our town, in the previous town I was in, they had just a data sheet of individuals, maybe a file on people that were autistic. It wasn't electronic. It was something that they could refer to. And they didn't take my son's fingerprints. They just had a picture of him, and they had details about ways they could communicate and interact with him. And I don't know if you got, Clarissa, is there a CPAC near you? Are you connected to one?
I'm not sure. They wanted to do fingerprints. I definitely told them to write it down. So we definitely did that. But they recommended bracelets, but my son takes everything off. He can't even keep clothes on. So bracelet,
not always an option for everybody.
Yeah, and he's very oral, so he puts everything in his mouth. That bracelet wouldn't last 5 minutes.
Right. And there's sometimes there's a cost associated with them, a monthly cost. It really just depends. There's different ones, but I'm in Massachusetts. Did you say you're in Missouri?
Yes, Kansas City.
Okay, so I mean, connecting with these other people here. I know you have some people at least demographically closer to you. I'm so much further away, but finding a CPAC that could help you, other parents that might have that information, because we're stronger in numbers, and they could help you. If they don't have that program that you feel comfortable with, maybe you could be part of a voice to create one, and then you would maybe also have that more of that social connection with other families, so you wouldn't feel as isolated. But the isolation, I still feel that way. People don't get it from the autistic parent perspective, and I just don't know when that will ever change. But just got to keep trying. But you're supported.
Thank you. Louise, can you share? Oh, you're on mute. Okay.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I am in Massachusetts, so I was gonna ask Rebecca and her son if they have a GPS, because I do have a GPS for my son too. And then so what I do, so I go to the police station like everybody was doing. Mm-hmm. So they take a picture for my son every year because it's changed. And then so I go to the nearest fire station. I report that in case fire in the house. And then there's a kid having special need and autism in the house, because my son is nonverbal too. So I, like Aline was saying, I go to the store, and then I introduce my son to them for them people that might need well too, because my son is take off all the time. Right now it's like a little piece of mind for me, because it does have a GPS on, so they can track him easy. So what we're doing right now is really important for all of us. So like for parents having kids with disabilities, there's something we don't know. So by sharing together, so we all learn from each other. Thank you.
And Louise, where are you from?
Originally, I'm from Haiti. Right now, I'm in Massachusetts.
You're in Massachusetts. It's a Massachusetts takeover. I love this.
Hi.
And Leonard and Rebecca recommended that we start a Facebook group, and so we can keep this going on an ongoing basis and not feel alone. Also, I am going to have a conversation with our girl Deborah in Chicago tomorrow, and we're going to talk about ways to collaborate. My focus with the Transition Academy is making sure that students seamlessly transition from high school to their post-secondary path. And then her focus, she has a family support group, and she's been around a while. And so then I'm noticing, Lynn, you have a foundation. And so those of us who have organizations, we definitely need to network. And then we all need to lean on and learn from one another. I am going to make sure that this recording and the morning recording, that we all have that to look at and to keep in our arsenal. And then also I have an evaluation. And so I need everyone to fill that out, give some feedback, and we'll move forward with next steps, if that's okay.
Okay.
Vicky, I see you with your notepad. Are you good? Vicky's with Vicky's with our PBS affiliate here in Kansas City, and she asked if she could sit in, and I was like, absolutely. So, you good?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay.
So much.
Okay. Thank you so very much, everyone. Again, this is just the beginning. I know I feel good. It sounds like everybody else feels good. We're going to, this is the kickoff for something fantastic and life affirming. Our children deserve it. And so we're going to keep this momentum going. So look for an email from me with an evaluation and with links to this morning's video as well as this evening's video. Thank you all so very much. And let's stay connected. Let's be good to ourselves first of all. And let's be kind to one another. Good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.